ATP is made from an adenosine molecule, which I have as A here, and it's linked to 3 phosphates that are in turn linked together by very high energy bonds. Extracting the energy from ATP is a complicated chemical process, and the overly simplified explanation is that the energy is released when the bond between the second and the third phosphates are broken. When the ATP is depleted of its energy, it is called adenosine diphosphate, or ADP, because there are only 2 phosphates bonded in sequence rather than 3. The released energy is used to power these cells' machinery. A phosphate can be rebonded back onto the ADP again so that it becomes another high-energy ATP. Now, there are 3 methods for doing this, and each differs in capacity and speed of ATP production. There is the creatine phosphate method. That is a very fast recharging mechanism with 6 to 8 seconds of ATP production capacity. Glycolysis is the second method, and it is reasonably fast, recharging ATP at an immediate or moderate rate. However, after producing ATP at a maximum speed, the acid produced by this system causes the athlete to stop so that the acid can clear. The aerobic method, that is a relatively slow recharging mechanism, has a very large ATP production capacity of hours and even up to days. These 3 ATP recharging methods are referred to as energy systems, and this is a really important term for you to remember and understand. The athlete uses the 2-second supply of stored ATP in the cell to produce the highest power output. Bursting out of the starting blocks or swinging a golf club at maximum speed are examples of when the athlete taps into the ATP stored to produce maximum possible power. However, sports performances seldom last 2 seconds or less. And when the store of ATP in the cell dips below around 60%, the brain concurrently activates all 3 recharging mechanisms or energy systems. However, each gears up to full speed at different times. This graphic here shows you the relative speed of each energy system for moving into high gear and the power output each produces. The creatine phosphate energy system is the immediate backup battery for the ATP store. The system can recharge ADP into ATP for 6 to 8 seconds quite quickly, and it is used when the athlete is moving at a very high rate of speed, such as during a 60-meter sprint. By the time the creatine phosphate battery has been drained, the next recharging mechanism, called glycolysis, has moved its machinery into high gear and takes over the bulk of the ATP production. However, glycolysis produces ATP more slowly than the creatine phosphate energy system does, and the brain will slow the athlete down so glycolysis can maintain the ATP store at 60%. And this is one of the reasons why athletes cannot produce as much power using glycolysis as they can when using creatine phosphate. The major problem, though, with glycolysis, when it's being used at its maximum ATP recharging capacity, is the nasty acid byproduct produced. After 60 seconds of using glycolysis at its maximum ATP production capacity, the athlete experiences unbearable pain due to the acid and must stop or slow down drastically in order to allow the acid to clear. If the athlete wants to run longer than 60 seconds, the brain will slow the athlete's speed of movement down to match the ATP production capacity of the aerobic energy system. And the question is, if all the energy being used for muscle contraction and other cell tasks is coming from the ATP store, why can't the athlete produce the same amount of power when using all 3 energy systems? And the answer goes back to the fact that the brain will not let the store of ATP in the cell dip below around 60%. The athlete can only move as fast as the ATP store is being maintained, and this depends on the speed of the ATP recharging systems. The slower the energy system is in producing ATP, the less power it provides the athlete. The 3 energy systems are a major focus of training for most sports, and there is not much you can do to change the store of ATP the athlete has available. However, the 3 recharging mechanisms are trainable to varying degrees, and for this reason it is worth knowing how each works to produce ATP and the reason for the limits to the ATP production capacity. So let's take a quick look at how each energy system works to recharge ADP back into ATP.